The Montana flood of 1964 remains one of the worst natural disasters in the state's history. In just a matter of days, rivers turned into torrents. Entire communities were completely cut off. Critical bridges and highways were destroyed. Worst of all, 28 people lost their lives, most notably members of the Blackfeet Reservation. What makes this story especially strange to me that I had just driven through all these places that had been absolutely devastated by the flood in 1964 without even realizing the history. I had spent the weekend exploring the east side of Glacier National Park, hiking new trails, and even spotting a cute black bear along the way. But it was on the drive home that I crossed Maria's Pass and traveled through Essex, completely unaware that both had been heavily damaged during the 1964 flood. Earlier that same day, I even crossed bridges that had previously been destroyed by this disastrous flood, which now had been repaired. Even stranger is that after I decided that I wanted to do this video on the 1964 flood, and I just did that hike in East Glacier, more floods in Glacier National Park, obviously nowhere near as extreme, made headlines and circulated social media. Here's a clip of the recent glacier floods that I saw on my timeline. These floods are reminders that these landscapes, as beautiful as they are always being shaped by powerful natural forces. And now seems like the perfect time to look back at the flood that changed Northwest Montana forever. Now, before we go any further, I have to do my due diligence and say, if you enjoy these types of videos, make sure you subscribe and like this video, as it makes it so I can make even more of them and keep you guys entertained with interesting / creepy Montana history. Now, I'm talking about a natural disaster today. Tomorrow I might talk about a bear attack or true crime that happened here in the state of Montana. If you like any of that kind of stuff, highly recommend subscribing. Oh, and of course, all sources that I got all my information from will be linked in the description. Let's get into the video. In early June, 14 to 15 inches of rainfall fell over the Continental Divide, compounding with a much larger than average snowpack that year, leading to the largest flood in Montana history. Locals remember seeing countless dead animals washing by and homes being ripped up and carried down in a sudden dramatic waterway. Before the flood, there were signs and predictions of this heavy rain from weatherman Ray Hall, although these warnings were largely unnoticed. I'm no expert in science, I'm actually horrible at it, but from my research, it seems like there was just a lot of moist air that came up north from the Gulf of Mexico that hit the western plains and the Rocky Mountains, which caused this heavier than normal rainfall. It was on June 7th that the Flathead River began to rise, flooding from Mary's Pass all the way down to Flathead Lake. And it was that afternoon and evening that people finally started to realize the dark nature of this storm. There were multiple dams that were damaged and destroyed during the flood, but there were two failures that had the greatest impact. I'm talking about the Swift Dam and the Two Medicine Dam. Together, they devastated the Blackfeet Reservation and contributed to the deaths of dozens of people. The Swift Dam was built on Birch Creek between 1912 and 1914 as part of a privately owned irrigation system that supplied water to nearly 93,000 acres of farmland, both on and off of the reservation. The 157-foot tall rock-filled dam stored about 31 acre-feet of water and collected runoff from about 185 square miles of watershed. Its spillway could discharge an estimated 10,000 square feet of water per second, and it was nearly 50 years that the dam operated without any major incidents, but that all changed on the morning of June 8th, 1964. At approximately 10:10 a.m., the Swift Dam failed, and there was no known witnesses that actually saw the collapse, and there was no effective warning that reached people living downstream. Although a local radio station attempted to broadcast an emergency message, it was just too little too late to help the majority of the people downstream. At that time, many Blackfeet reservations, roughly 6,500 residents, lived on Birch Creek, where the fertile valley provided water, grazing land, timber, and firewood. The collapse sent a massive wall of water through the reservation, unfortunately taking 19 lives. Investigators later concluded that the floodwaters exceeded the dam's spillway capacity, causing water to overtop the embankment. The overflowing water eroded the downstream face, undermining the upstream face until the structure completely collapsed. There were large sections of the rock-filled dam that were carried as far as half a mile downstream, demonstrating the immense force of this flood. It was about 8 hours later, approximately at 6 p.m., that the Two Medicine Dam also failed. This dam was constructed between 1911 and 1913 as a part of the Blackfeet irrigation project. The dam stood at about 37 feet high and stretched 160 feet across the Two Medicine River, and stored roughly 16,000 acre-feet of water. Its spillway and outlets were designed to pass about 5,500 cubic feet of water per second. Like the Swift Dam, investigators determined that the floodwaters overwhelmed the spillway, with inflows estimated at nearly 9,600 cubic feet per second. The breach likely began where the earth embankments met the concrete spillway. Water entered cracks by the settlements, eroding the embankments until the sections of the dam simply washed away. Unlike the Swift Dam, however, the deterioration of the Two Medicine Dam was witnessed as it happened. The slower failure luckily gave authorities the ability to warn residents and evacuate as many people downstream before the dam collapsed as possible. Although no one died as a direct impact of this dam's failure, flooding earlier that day did claim the lives of 9 people. In one of the tragedy's worst incidents, a truck carrying 17 people got stuck trying to cross a flooded river. Despite rescue efforts, 9 people died, including 8 children. The area affected by the flooding covered nearly 30,000 square miles, which is roughly 20% of the state of Montana, and Montana is a pretty darn big state. By Thursday, June 11th, President Lyndon B. Johnson declared the 9 counties of northwest Montana a federal disaster area, which meant that Montana got federal funds and resources to help the people affected directly by this disaster. Here are some of the accounts from people directly affected by the 1964 flood. I got all these sources from the Flathead Beacon article, which is linked down below, where there's actually many more that I'm even including here. So if you're interested in that, check it out down below. First up, we have a college kid coming home from school to the surprise of the flood. Jerry Mayhew, who was 19 years old in 1964 and was just finishing up his freshman year of college in Eugene, Oregon. I was on my way home from school driving my 1952 Ford, and I was happy-go-lucky. I was anxious to be home and get to work, to do something other than school. I ran home from the hot springs towards Elmo, and I came down the big hill and saw a huge panoramic view of Flathead Lake. And I couldn't believe it. The lake was chocolate brown, and there were houses and parts of houses and entire trees with leaves and root systems floating around. I was in a state of shock because nobody had told me anything and I had no idea what happened. I thought the dam had broke or someone had bombed it. That is one thing about this disaster that I didn't really think about until reading this, is that with communications being worse in 1964, I mean, it was getting there, but definitely not as advanced as today. Word would travel a lot less quickly, so people just coming up for summer vacations or coming home from college to see Flathead Lake be a dirty, muddy brown is kind of incredible, because if you didn't know, Flathead Lake is one of the clearest lakes in the US, I feel like. It's known for being crystal clear, so seeing it muddy with trees and literal houses floating in it is kind of crazy. Now we're going over a family that didn't want to evacuate but was glad that they did. Clifford Brennerman was a 33-year-old in 1964 and was a farmer in Kalispell along the Flathead River. I was home with a small baby that was 2 weeks old. We weren't that concerned about the flood, but my mother-in-law kept calling saying we needed to get out of there. So, right around midnight, we got out and stayed out with my parents overnight in Creston, where we came back the next morning and couldn't even get within a mile of the house. Oh, I'm glad he took the baby and got out of there. This one's all about a community coming together and not realizing just how serious the flood was right away. Van Rinsum. I was a member of the church in summers, and we were in the middle of building a brand new church. Every Monday night we had our building meeting, and we had a fellow there who worked for the telephone company who was on the board. He came in and said that he had to work because of the flood. He was always a real big jokester, so we all thought he was just pulling another one on us because we hadn't never really heard of the flood. I mean, we knew the river was running high, but we didn't know that much. Anyway, he excused himself and left pretty quick. Then the chairman of the construction board came in. He was a local contractor, and he said he couldn't stay either because of the flood. That's when we thought, Jesus, maybe we better get out of here and see what's going on. The Summers Fire Department got a call from the sheriff's office, and he tells us that we're the only fire department that's going to stay high and dry. He asked us if we could put up 3,500 people, so we got ready. If you don't know, Summers is like really close to Flathead Lake. Like I'd say it's on the north end of Flathead, so that's pretty dang far from Glacier and Two Medicine and all these areas where the dams were breaking. So it's pretty crazy that all the way down there is finally where they get to a safe spot where this church is luckily able to help these people that are about to become stranded because of all this water, like that last guy who couldn't even get within a mile of his house after he left. Here's a quick one about people trying to save everything they have moving their home. Around Butte-Meimer, around Columbia Falls, there was a big effort to move people's mobile homes, get them out of the way. So they used Plum Creek's log yard equipment to hook up and drag homes away. They didn't bother unhooking water or electricity, they just went. Now we have one from Robin Street. My dad called in and said there was water coming up and our friend George needed help moving his cattle. We needed to get some pigs that were surrounded by water, so I got on the boat and ran over. Well, we got on one back over to dry land and I went back for another. The water was running high, though, and the pig kept getting underwater. When I got back to the shore, I pulled her up and she wasn't breathing, so I gave her artificial respiration by jumping on her belly 3 times, and then poof, she got up and ran away. There were a lot of pigs and cattle that got killed in that flood. Obviously that one's a little bit silly, jumping on a pig 3 times, bringing it back to life, but there was quite a bit of animals that died. At the very beginning of the video, one of my first lines that I say in my script is talking about how many animals were just washing by people as the water flooded into towns and cities and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, a lot of animals unfortunately did pass away because of the flood. Luckily, some farmers were able to save some of their livestock. All right, now we have Bruce Young. He was also 19 years old in 1964, and he lived along Flathead Lake, and he flew with his father over the flood. My dad was a pilot, and he kept his airplane in the city airport south of Kalispell. When we knew the flood was peaking, he said, "Let's go take a look," and so we did. We flew over and over the whole flood, and it was spectacular. We saw so many houses in Columbia Falls with just rooftops showing. We saw that the river had widened out of its banks, and in some places, a mile out. There were animals standing in fields with just their heads above water, and there were dead pigs floating down the river. Just like that guy who saved pigs and had to jump on it 3 times. Throw back to that story. There was so much in the river that shouldn't have been there. Once you see something like that, you realize the power of water and how it can change people's lives in an instant. And there you have like 5 to 7 accounts of people that actually lived through the flood. Whether it's people who reluctantly evacuated, people that had to go in and try to save their livestock, kids coming home from school to realize that the area and life that they once knew was completely turned upside down by this massive flood. Could you imagine right now if the town that you're living in was completely flooded all the way up to its rooftops and you saw cows, cats, and dogs just float by in the water? Following the disaster, both dams ended up being replaced. The Two Medicine Dam was replaced in 1966, and the new Swift Dam followed in 1967. Both remain in operation to this day. These failures changed how dams were managed. The disaster demonstrated that extreme floods can overwhelm multiple dams during the same event, that spillways must be designed for rare catastrophic floods, and that timely warnings and evacuations can save lives. The Swift Dam failed with almost no warning, while the Two Medicine Dam's slow failure gave people time to escape. More than 6 years later, the 1964 flood remains one of Montana's worst natural disasters ever. The failures of the Swift and Two Medicine Dams continue to influence dam design, flood forecasting, public warning, and emergency planning across the United States. Like mentioned at the beginning of this video, the 1964 flood was one of the biggest disasters ever for the state. So if you have any more information or personal stories, leave them down below. Maybe one day I'll do a follow-up to this video, as I know that there are layers and layers and layers to the 1964 flood, as there's many people still around that experienced it to this day. With all that being said, make sure to subscribe and like the video. I'm Devin. This has been Montana After Midnight. Have a fantastic day.